This is Accounting 1. We are in Chapter 11, Lesson 1. And in this chapter, we're going to be posting to the general and subsidiary ledgers. In Chapter 10 and 9, we had been doing our transactions in our journal on how to deal with sales and with purchases. Now we're going to be posting those. So first of all, there's some vocabulary that you should have already had done. You need to know that if you need to see the chart of accounts for the general ledgers, it's on page 231. But because our business is so large for this unit, we have what's known as subsidiary ledgers. And a subsidiary ledger is a separate ledger that's summarized in a single general ledger account. It contains only the accounts for vendors. So for example, the accounts payable ledger is a subsidiary ledger. And in this is where we're going to include all of our individual accounts for our accounts payable. We also have an accounts receivable subsidiary ledger, and that's where we're going to put all of those accounts that are our customers that owe us money. So they're all in here together. The one thing you need to know is all of these numbers together for all of our vendors should add up to be the same number that's in your accounts payable main account. Okay, so the subsidiary ledger is just basically a sub-ledger of accounts, and those total up to what the main account should be. So the first one we're going to start with for our first transaction, you can see here we have the accounts payable ledger forms. So they look an awful lot like our general ledgers, except for the fact that we have our debit and credit, but we only have a credit balance. We don't have a column for debit balance. That's because you should never have a debit balance. Okay, these are accounts payable, so these are vendors that we owe money to. If it was a debit balance, that would mean that we had overpaid them. So in that case, you would just put it in here as a negative number. But we should never have that for what we're going to be working on. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do if you are creating or opening a ledger, because it's going to have you open a ledger in your assignment, you're going to write the vendor name. It goes right up here. Next, you're going to put in the vendor number, just like we did in the general ledgers. Vendor numbers, vendors should be organized alphabetically. So make sure you put them in alphabetical order. Third thing we're going to do is write the date. If we are opening a new page because the other page got full, we're going to write the word balance in the item line. That's the only time we're going to write in item. We're going to put a check mark in the post reference because this information didn't come from a journal anywhere. It just came from the previous ledger page. And finally, we're going to write the balance that the account had on the previous page. So if you're opening a brand new one, you're only going to have the vendor name and number. If you are starting a new page for a vendor, you're going to have this line in here. Okay, so now we're ready to post from a purchases journal to an accounts payable ledger. So we've done the purchases journal in the last chapter, and we're ready to post that. So this is exactly what we did. Remember, your purchases journal only had one column, but it's for two separate accounts. It's for the purchases debit and an accounts payable credit. So this one's for Crown Distributing. So we're going to go to the Crown Distributing ledger. The first thing we're going to do is put in the date that it happened, so November the 2nd. Next, we're going to write the page journal. This came from the purchases journal, so it's got a P, and this was page 11. All we're doing when we're posting is just basically copying. Write the credit amount, okay? Because we should have a credit balance, and there was nothing here already, we're going to look up here. This says accounts payable credit. So this is the number, or this is the one we're concerned with because we're in the accounts payable subsidiary ledger. So accounts payable is going to be a credit. We put that in. And because there was not already a balance, that number is going to come straight over. So we now have a credit balance, which means, remember, an accounts payable is a liability, so it has a normal credit balance. So we owe Crown Distributing $2,039. And then we're going to take the vendor number 230, and put up here in the post reference of the purchases journal so that we know that we have posted it. When you're doing your assignment, do not go through and put in all your post references at one time. You need to do them in order. Once you finish posting, come back up and put in your post reference number. Okay, the next one we're going to post is if we post from a cash payments journal to an accounts payable ledger. So now we have the cash payments journal. Remember, this is anytime we pay cash for anything. So looking here, it looks like we paid Synthetic Arts $1,050. Okay, we're not worried about what's in the cash credit column. We're only worried about what's in the accounts payable debit column. So same thing, we're going to start with writing the date. Next, we're going to write the journal page number it came from. Because this is the cash payments journal, we're going to start it with CP, and it's page 21. We're going to write the debit amount. Remember, I said we're only looking at the accounts payable debit, which is this number here. We're going to bring it straight down to the debit column. Now this one already had a balance, and it had a credit balance. So if you remember, if you have a credit and a debit, you have to subtract. Okay? If they're the same, you add. If they're different, you subtract. So we're going to take the 4,866 minus the 1,050. That's going to leave us $3,816, and that goes in the credit balance column because this credit number was bigger. So basically we owed $4,866 and we paid them $1,050. You should be able to match this number that you paid with one of your charges that you did up here. So for the example, this one's the same number. Okay, you'll either find it here or you're going to find it in a credit balance because you paid several invoices at once. And finally, again, we're going to write the vendor number back up here on our cash payments journal to show that we are done posting that account. The next one we're going to post is a credit entry from a general journal to an accounts payable ledger. So this one, it looks like we purchased some store supplies on account from Golf Craft Supply is what has happened here. So now we need to go to the Golf Craft Supply. Remember, we had to put that slash because we got to post it in two different places. Right now we're not worried about posting the accounts payable one, but we're posting the Golf Craft Supply in the subsidiary ledger. So we're going to start by putting the date. We're going to put the post reference. This was the general journal, that's why it's got a G, so it's G11. We're going to take the credit amount. This is the only one we're worried about right now. That credit of 210, and put here in the credit account. And because we have a credit and a credit, will we add or subtract? Right, we're going to add those together. So we're going to write the new balance in the credit column. So we owed them $498, but we bought some more supplies for our store worth $210, so now we owe them a total of $708. To finish up, we're going to take the vendor number, put it up here in the post reference on the bottom half of that slash. Okay. The next one we're going to do is we're going to post a debit entry from a general journal to an accounts payable ledger. Same thing, only we're recording a debit instead of a credit. We're going to put in the date. We're going to put in the G11. And this time, because it looks like we had a return, we returned some things to Crown Distributing. And so we get so they're going to take that off the amount we owe. So that's why it's a debit. So we're going to record that debit in the debit column. This time we had a credit balance. Now we have a debit balance. So we're going to have to subtract that. Remember, if they're different, a credit and a debit, we subtract. So we subtract the two. The credit was the bigger number, so it goes in the credit column. Okay, and then we're going to show we're done, we're going to take the vendor number, number 230, and put it back up in the post reference column. So when you get finished, you will have a completed accounts payable ledger that looks like this. So you can see here, American Paint, we owe them a little over $7,000, Ceramic Supply, a little over $4,000, Crown Distributing, Floral Design, Golf Craft Supply, and Synthetic Arts. We are going to prove the accounts payable ledger by creating a schedule of accounts. Basically, a schedule of accounts just lists all of the people that are in that subsidiary ledger that you owe money to. So if you do not owe money to any of these, if any of these have a zero balance, you do not put them on here. You're going to skip them. Okay, just like any of our reports, the top line is going to be the name of our business. So in this case, it's Hobby Shack Inc. It is a schedule of accounts payable because this is the accounts payable subsidiary ledger. You're going to put the date, November 30th, and the year. And all we're going to do is list all of those accounts, all of the accounts that had a balance, and the amount of the balance. You'll add those up, and then that number should be the same number as your accounts payable general ledger account. Okay, so here's your vocabulary. Make sure that was already done, and make sure that you have answered the questions. So next we're going to do work together and on your own for this lesson. Join me for that video.